Well, good afternoon, everybody. Can I say thank you for coming here this afternoon? What's clear is right now the economy isn't working for Kiwis. Wages have been growing slower than inflation, and over the last 3 years the buying power of New Zealanders' wages has dropped significantly. And with interest rates rapidly rising and repayments on a typical mortgage now up $750 a fortnight just in the last 2 years. Food prices have been increasing at rates not seen since the 1980s, and rents are up $180 a week. And unfortunately today, Treasury has confirmed that 6 years of Labour's economic mismanagement will continue to hit Kiwis in their back pocket, with their forecast showing a sustained economic slowdown, high inflation and high interest rates. And according to Treasury, the economic slowdown is expected to last for another 18 months as interest rates stay higher for longer to combat persistently high inflation, driven by Labour's addiction to spending. And make no mistake, Labour's excessive spending is driving this economic pain. Astonishingly, government spending is up by another $6.9 billion over the coming years. And as a result, the return to surplus has been delayed for a third time. And debt has exploded to above $100 billion in 2025, and that's up from just $5 billion in 2019. But what have we got to show for all of that spending? An economic slowdown and Kiwis battling high inflation and high interest rates. And as Treasury has said, quote, households and businesses are expected to remain under pressure. I'm telling you, Kiwis deserve much better than this. But unfortunately, with Treasury forecasting more pain with the economic slowdown due to persist through to the end of 2024. Inflation to stay above the targeted rates until the end of 2024. Interest rates to stay higher for longer in an attempt to combat inflation. And a delay in the return to surplus to 2027, meaning 7 straight years of deficits. And debt servicing costs rising to $11 billion per year, more than we spend on primary and secondary schools. And the problem is this, that it's not just about the numbers. I'm up and down the country every week, and I can tell you behind all the data and behind all the headlines and the big numbers are Kiwi families that are facing tough choices just to get by each day. Like the families having to stop swimming lessons so that they can afford the groceries. Like the parents needing to take on a second job and so aren't seeing their kids enough. Like the first home buyers who now have a house worth less than their mortgage and yet see interest rates more than doubling. And sadly, this economic outlook is distinctly New Zealand's problem, driven by the government's excessive spending and complete lack of an economic plan. We are the only country in the Asia-Pacific region in a recession, and across the ditch in Australia, the books are in surplus right now. The IMF is forecasting that New Zealand's economic growth prospects next year are amongst the worst in the world. And too many of our young people are looking at opportunities overseas and voting with their feet, with new data showing today that 40,000 Kiwis are permanently leaving the country in just the last year. And I just say to you all that life shouldn't be this tough. And National has a very clear message that we can rebuild the economy and we can get it working again for New Zealanders. But let's be clear about how we got here. Part of the problem is that Labour has had no plan to grow the economy other than spending more money. And that spending addiction has seen inflation stay higher for longer than from all of that excessive spending. Despite spending $1 billion more each and every week, there is very little to show for it. Education standards have clearly slipped, with young Kiwis falling well outside the top 10 countries of the world in maths, science and English. The healthcare system is in crisis, with record workforce shortages and major blowouts in emergency department wait times and specialist wait times and immunisation rates. Crime has soared and it's out of control. And yet there is almost no focus in Wellington on whether the money that the government spends on behalf of taxpayers is actually delivering results. And in addition to all of that extra spending, Labour have actively made it harder to get the economy going again. A tsunami of well-meaning regulation and red tape has had the cumulative effect of making it way too hard to do things in this country, to build things, to invest in things, and to grow things in New Zealand. And we need to make it much, much easier for people to get on and to make things happen to grow the New Zealand economy. And that's what we're going to do in a national government. Before I talk a little bit more about our plan, I want to pass off to Nicola to talk a little bit more detail about what Prefu has unfolded today.
Thanks, Chris. As Christopher has said, Treasury's forecasts paint a concerning picture about the New Zealand economy and the government's books. Put simply, Labour has left the cupboard bare. After years of spending up a storm, the day of reckoning is now here. This update forecasts ongoing deficits, ballooning debt, and very little cash left in the kitty. Lacklustre economic growth is forecast, with high inflation and interest rates forecast to put a massive handbrake on all Kiwis working hard to get ahead. Lowlights include debt blowing out to $103 billion in 2027. That is $13 billion higher than forecast at the budget. The longest string of deficits since 1994, with the government books staying in the red until 2027, marking 7 years out of balance. Flat real GDP per capita until the end of 2024. Domestic inflation and price pressure persisting more than anticipated, with interest rates to stay elevated for a longer period. There are significant fiscal risks noted in this update, including the government's proposed income insurance scheme, the Lake Onslow project, and light rail proposals in Auckland and Wellington, unfunded promises from Labour. It's important to remember today that this update is Grant Robertson's best case scenario. It assumes that after years of spraying the money hose around, suddenly he's going to show levels of restraint he has never before achieved. That is simply not believable. Grant Robertson has never stuck to his spending limits in the past, and he is not about to start. Indeed, even this update shows that he will spend $6.9 billion more over the next 4 years than he said he would at the budget just 4 months ago. In the 2020 pre-election fiscal update, Grant Robertson set out a spending limit of around $2.5 billion per year for upcoming budgets. He has not stuck to that limit in any of his past 3 budgets, meaning that government spending this year will be a full $23 billion more than Labour said it would at the pre-election update in 2020. Indeed, so predictable has Labour's excessive spending become that Treasury includes a risk scenario in this update today, with forecasts of what will happen if the government doesn't stick to its budget allowances, politely noting in Treasury speak, quote, "In recent times, the government's final allocations have exceeded the signalled budget allowance." The problem is that that spending has included things like money wasted on go-nowhere projects like the TVNZ-RNZ merger and the Auckland Cycle Bridge, excessive spending on government consultants, hundreds of millions of dollars on light rail business cases with no rail built. I could go on, but the bottom line is this: we need to get discipline back to government spending and stop the waste. We need to ensure we get value out of every taxpayer dollar, because New Zealanders work incredibly hard to earn a living, and we know they could do a lot with that money. In fact, that is why today we are recommitting to tax relief that will see an average income family with small kids better off by up to $250 a fortnight. But we are also committing that every dollar in tax that we do take will be spent wisely. Our fiscal plan will reflect our commitments to balance the need to support frontline services, prioritise investment carefully, and ensure careful control of taxpayer funds. Labor can't be trusted to sort this out. The question New Zealanders should ask themselves today is, what does New Zealand have to show for the more than $100 billion worth of debt Labor has accumulated on their behalf? Labor's track record proves that they cannot control their own spending. National has what is needed right now. We will mount the fiscal repair job New Zealand needs, and we will ensure New Zealanders can get ahead once more. I'll hand back to you, Christopher.
Thanks. Well, thank you, Nicola. As Nicola has said, New Zealand can be doing so much better than this. And it is time for a new way of doing things. It's time to get the economy working again for Kiwis. National's going to rebuild the economy because that is how we will lift wages, that is how we will secure jobs, that's how we will get Kiwis to get ahead. And a strong economy is how we will reduce and end the cost of living crisis, get mortgage rates under control, and it's how we can afford the public services that we all deserve. National's plan to rebuild the economy includes stopping wasteful spending and getting the books back into order. It is also including delivering tax relief to encourage hard work and to ease the cost of living crisis. It's about cutting red tape to make it much easier to invest and grow. It's about building infrastructure for growth like roads and public transport. And it's only by doing all of these things and by actively hustling and looking for opportunities to grow that we get some ambition and some aspiration back into this country. We get to rebuild our economy, we get it working again for Kiwis, and importantly, we get the country back on track. And with that, Nicola and I are happy to take your questions. Sorry, Mikey. Absolutely not. When we announced our tax plan, we said that we would make it fully funded, that it would stand alone. It can do that because we've reprioritised savings and, importantly, we've raised new revenues. Sorry, Thomas. Sorry, I'll just go to Thomas. Sorry, Thomas. Yep, I'll let Nicola talk to that.
Yeah, look, the important principle we outlined in our tax plan is we think that revenues raised through the emissions trading scheme should all go towards income tax reduction. That principle stands, and of course, as is noted in this update, there is always some variability in the forecasts for how much funding will be raised by the emissions trading scheme. We're aware of the changes in the document today, and we will reflect those in our full fiscal plan, which will show you that we can deliver our tax plan.
Sorry, Amelia.
You've got to find another $500 billion.
Well, you will notice that on the election campaign already, Labor has made a series of very large financial commitments calling on future operating allowances. We have been very conservative and very careful about the commitments we have made so that we can ensure we can deliver our tax plan while also protecting frontline services.
Sorry, Mikey. Sorry, we're going to go to Mikey.
So you're also saying that we're the only country in the Asia Pacific region in a recession. That's no longer true.
Well, we are certainly one of the slowest growing countries in the world.
That is not true.
Well, it's not. The IMF forecast, the forecast going out says that we've got very low and basically flat growth. And as you can see from the IMF, we're going to be one of the slowest growing countries in the world next year in economic growth. As of today, we are the only country in an economic recession. With the forecast going forward, there is slow, anemic growth. I would say there is nothing to be proud about here. This is economic mismanagement on a scale that we have not seen before. Nicola and I spoke to you all when we first became leaders. We said at that time the government should be making adjustments so we didn't drive inflation. By driving inflation, and you would have noticed in the Treasury Prefu statements, we're seeing high levels of domestic inflation, not international inflation. That inflation's led to high interest rates. That high interest rates led to a recession and slow economic growth, and that's leading to rising levels of unemployment. That is the history of economics that we need to relearn. We need to deal with the causes of it, and this government has failed to do that over the last 2 years. Sorry, Claire.
Do you remain with the pretty much cast iron guarantee and deliver your tax cuts?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
How does that affect your ability to deliver on your other policy promises? And does it mean there are some policies that you might have wanted to roll out which you will no longer roll out because of it?
We're confident with the commitments that we've made that we can deliver on all the policies that we've announced thus far. And as we've said, we actually deliver. We can deliver on our tax commitments because we've said that we will fund it fully by reprioritising savings and raising new revenue.
I'm asking more about the policies that you might not now be able to afford because of the state of the books and because of your promise to deliver on the tax cuts.
Well, we're now taking this data away. We'll digest it very carefully over the next few days and weeks, and we'll come back before early voting starts with our fiscal plan.
How confident that $500 million hole will you fill that by making more cuts?
What I'd just say to you is that this is a government that is spending a huge amount of money, as you know. This is a government that found... I just want to give you a sense of the magnitude of the number. No. $500 million worth of rapid antigen tests just expired because they over-ordered. $700 million on a cost of living payment, rinky-dink band-aid payment model to deal with inflation. $700 million on extending a fuel subsidy only to extend the fuel tax. So we are confident that we'll be able to find our way. We'll look at the numbers and what's been proposed today. We've only just seen them and we'll come back on that.
People sitting at home, they'll be wondering, does this mean more cuts under National?
What it means is we can deliver on the commitments that we've said already about delivering tax relief for people because we have fully funded tax program around raising new revenue and reprioritising savings. Thomas.
Look, we have been very clear that we think this is a time for careful government spending, but we've made some bottom line commitments. We will be protecting frontline services. We will be increasing health and education funding each year. We will put together a careful fiscal plan that balances those priorities, and we're confident, given how careful we've been about future commitments and our commitment to reprioritisation, that we can put together a fiscal plan that allows us to deliver on all of those commitments.
Sorry, mate, what do you go?
Can I?
Well, let's be clear, we can't do worse than this crowd.
Yeah. We have just received the update from the government on the real state of the books. Now, you're asking me about $500 million. There is a $13 billion hole in these documents that we learned of an hour and a half ago. Now, our job is to get the New Zealand economy growing again, to put together a plan that allows New Zealanders to deal with the cost of living crisis, to get inflation under control, to deliver better frontline services. Our fiscal plan will achieve all of those things, but you'll forgive me if we're not going to release it in the next hour.
Jason?
Can I just be clear? You said there was a $13 billion hole. What's the hole?
So if you go to 2027, debt is forecast to rise to $103 billion. That is $13 billion more than it was forecast to be at the budget just a few months ago.
Sorry, Jason?
Will you be able to stick to your pledge to increase health and education spending by
Absolutely.
inflation?
Absolutely. We're going to increase health and education spending each and every year. We've been very clear about that for the last year. Right, sorry. We're going to give you a fiscal plan, as we said, once we've digested all of this information. It's important. We only had it an hour and a half ago. We're going to take our time, do it right. It's important, given the state of this crisis that New Zealand's facing right now. And we will make sure we have a comprehensive fiscal plan you'll see well before early voting starts. Sorry, Richard.
If you go out to 2027 and if you look at the expense table, core Crown expense tables, and
Yep.
almost all of them, and in particular police education, tertiary education, etc., forecast a drop in 2027. Now, you're saying you're going to spend more money on health and education. These forecasts are predicated on spending less. How are you going to fill that gap?
Well, I think it's important to note, Richard, that those forecasts are put together without the allocation from future budget operating allowances having yet been made. And so from a technical perspective, you would expect that those numbers will in fact increase. That's what the operating allowances are for. And so National will ensure that we are able to increase funding for those core areas by allocating future operating allowances wisely.
But you said you're going to spend those operating allowances on your tax cuts.
No, I didn't say that.
Just on are you confident?
Sorry, Mikey, can you go? Mikey?
Are you confident
Yeah, sorry.
Are you confident that in budget 2024, you will increase operational expenditure by $3.5 billion or less?
You're asking me about the size of our future operating allowance, and we will make that clear in our fiscal plan.
Okay, but you, and do you accept that if you do not do that, if you increase it by $4.5 billion, which is plausible, then we will be in deficit for at least the next 10 years?
You could be clear that National will be spending taxpayers' money more wisely than Labor.
So 3.5 or less?
We will not be needing to spend more money than Labor.
We're seeing record levels of migration. Is that good for the economy?
Look, I mean, you've seen the report today say that drives some economic activity that offsets some of the declining activity that's happening across the country. What I'd say to you is alarming is that we've had 40,000 Kiwis, almost 40,000 Kiwis, decide to leave New Zealand permanently. That is not good, and part of the reason is that they don't feel it's an economy where they can work hard and get ahead. Part of it is they don't feel that this is a country that actually has good health, law and order, and it's a country that they don't feel has got good education and health outcomes. Sorry?
What's National's migration target?
Well, it will vary depending upon what the needs are within the economy. We want an immigration strategy that's very strongly linked to our economic growth plan. And it's important that we actually get the worker shortages and the skills that we desperately need to attract to this country. But we have to get the balance right and making sure that it links in with infrastructure and also with the economic shortages that we've got.
We did see in Prefu today, though, that we perhaps, the levels of migration have put an inflationary pressure on because they have been so high. The forecasts are that it will fall back to 40,000. Do you commit to keeping migration at that 40,000?
Well, what we commit to doing is making sure that we can maximise the opportunities in the economy, and it's really important that we actually have immigration, set and syncing to what we need in the economy with respect to the shortages and the skill shortages that we have. And so it will vary and it will change year by year, but it's important that it's strongly linked to our economic agenda, and that's what we'll make sure happens.
Have you forecast how many?
Sorry, Maki, carry on. Well, what I want to make sure is that the New Zealand economy maximises every opportunity that it has. When we have an outlook of zero to flat to very little growth, it's important that we actually get this economy growing and moving again. We have other countries like Australia that have growth in the economy. As I said to you, it'll vary by year, but it's important that we actually sync up immigration with infrastructure and also with our economic shortages that we have. It'll vary by year depending upon what's needed in the economy to maximise the opportunities that we've got in front of us. What we've committed to is increasing health and education budgets each and every year. And we're going to make sure that we move the money out of the back office functions to the frontline services where they're desperately needed.
Can we get a commitment on how much you want to increase health and education?
Well, you will see that when we announce our fiscal plan, which we said we will announce before early voting starts. And that is the point which we actually put that all together on the back of the data that we've discovered in the last hour and a half.
There is an argument that if it's not at least by inflation, then it's not a real increase though. So hence the question, are you committing to increase it at least by inflation?
What we've committed over a year ago is that we will increase health and education budgets each and every year under our government. We will now take Prefu, we'll go away, put our fiscal plan together. That will be revealed to you all and to the New Zealand people before the election, early voting starts. But what I just say to you is, let's be really clear. This is a major economic challenge for New Zealanders that's causing huge pain and suffering out there. And it's the Kiwis tonight that I'm worried about, that actually are worried about losing their home because interest rates are staying higher. It's the people that can't afford food out there in New Zealand, the people that are in food banks that I sort of was talking to people about this morning, who are actually people with good paying jobs, average incomes that still can't get ahead and are in food banks in record numbers. That's why we have to fix this economy and face up to it and get better outcomes and better results than what's being achieved today. Again, we'll reveal all of that when we detail our fiscal plan in the coming weeks.
Grant Robertson says there is light at the end of the tunnel.
I want to be crystal clear. Grant Robertson is going to go down as one of the worst finance ministers this country has ever had. I am not taking lectures from Grant Robertson or Chris Hipkins, given their economic mismanagement and adding $13 billion worth of debt to our economy. So I don't care what Chris Hipkins and Grant Robertson say on the economy. It's not credible and it's not believable.
To what extent has the pandemic and our state funds had on the government's budget?
Well, as you've seen, we've continued to spend money well after the pandemic period, and we've continued, when lockdowns have finished and the need for support through COVID has finished, the government has continued with its foot flat on the accelerator, spending money like never before. That is driving domestic inflation, not international inflation, domestic inflation, something the government can control through its own actions. That is driving interest rates. That's put the economy into low growth. That's causing rising unemployment.
And Labour says that it will fund free survival screening for all. Will National match that?
Yeah, look, we're open to more work on breast screening. You would have seen that we've extended breast screening, or cancer screening in general. You would have seen that we've extended breast screening from 69 to 74, saving 65 lives a year. We announced that last year. I haven't seen the detail of it, but we're open to looking at it.
Survival screening, Nicola, what's your thoughts on that?
Look, as the leader said, we see the real benefits that come from cancer screening in terms of detecting cancers earlier. You've seen from us a commitment to fund additional cancer drugs to extend screening for breast cancer, and we'll look carefully at the cervical cancer proposal as well.
David Seymour today is softening his language around his threats not to support future budgets. Have you told him to pull his head in?
Oh, look, David and I talk regularly. We're good friends, and we've been neighbours for 4 years, as you well know. We meet up and discuss a range of topics regularly. No, not particularly. No, we just talk about a range of topics quite regularly. Yep. No, David and I pick up the phone. We catch up for dinner and lunch together, coffees, and David and I have spoken this morning, we've spoken yesterday, we speak quite regularly, and what I'd say to you is I am extremely confident that a National Act government will be incredibly stable, that we are united and aligned on wanting to change this government. We are united and aligned on wanting to improve this economy. We are united and aligned about dealing with law and order and improving health and education. We may have different means by which we deliver those ends, but we will work our way constructively through it, and we will deal with it, and we will work with it, and we'll work with it very constructively.
Going forward, will you stop using the term recession?
Well, yes, we're going to have low growth is what we're seeing, flat growth. Low growth is what we're seeing right here, right now in the forecast going forward.
Can I just note that the Reserve Bank have forecast a double-dip recession, that we've been in recession, and that we will go back into recession. The Treasury forecast today acknowledges we have been in recession. They are slightly more optimistic than the Reserve Bank. A range of different economists have a range of different views on just how slow growth will be in this economy. But what they all agree on is it's dark times ahead.
Awesome. All right, guys. Thank you so much.